Chapter 1. Rebirth. Part 1. Awakening. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating void where time seemed to stand still. It felt like an eternity, drifting in nothingness until a sharp, searing pain tore through his very essence, pulling him violently from the depths of oblivion. Gasping for breath, the protagonist awoke, his consciousness forcibly thrust into the present. His senses were overwhelmed by the unfamiliarity of his surroundings. A wave of disorientation hit him, his mind struggling to reconcile the past with the present. His eyes fluttered open to an unfamiliar ceiling, intricately carved with motifs of dragons and ancient symbols, their meanings lost to time. He was lying on a grand four-poster bed, its velvet canopy casting deep shadows across the room. The air was thick with the scent of incense, mingling with something metallic and unsettlingly familiar, the acrid tang of blood. He sat up abruptly, his head pounding with an intensity that threatened to split his skull. His surroundings swam in and out of focus, but he forced himself to stay upright. Panic gnawed at the edges of his consciousness as he looked down at his hands. They were not his hands. Instead of the calloused, work-worn hands he remembered, these were pale, smooth, and adorned with rings of silver and gold, each one set with precious stones. A wave of nausea swept over him, and he stumbled out of the bed, his legs weak and unsteady. He caught sight of a mirror on the opposite wall and, drawn by a mixture of dread and curiosity, he staggered towards it. The reflection that stared back at him was that of a young man, barely out of adolescence, with dark hair falling in soft waves around a face that was both noble and delicate. Striking green eyes, filled with confusion and fear, looked back at him. This was not his face. The panic intensified, his mind racing to make sense of the impossible. He clutched the sides of the mirror, his breathing ragged as he tried to steady himself. It was then that the memories began to flood in, disjointed, fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle scattered across his mind. He saw glimpses of a grand hall filled with stern-faced nobles, a father whose presence was as imposing as it was authoritative, and a brother whose eyes burned with ambition and jealousy. Rael, the name echoed in his mind, carrying with it a rush of foreign emotions. Anger, fear, betrayal. He was Rael, the son of Lord Aelric, a noble of significant standing in this strange and dangerous world. The memories were not his own, yet they felt as real and vivid as any he had ever known. As the memories settled, clarity began to emerge from the chaos. He saw a vivid scene of a grand banquet, where laughter and music filled the air. He was there, as Rael, smiling and toasting with goblets of wine. But beneath the surface of this joviality, a darker undercurrent ran. He saw Cedric, his older brother, watching him with eyes that gleamed with malice. The next memory was of searing pain, his vision blurring as the world tilted and darkness claimed him. Cedric's face was the last thing he saw, twisted into a cruel smile. The realization hit him like a hammer blow. He had been poisoned, murdered by his own brother in a bid for power. But instead of dying, he had somehow been thrust into this new existence, inhabiting the body of Rael. The how and why of it were mysteries he could not yet comprehend, but the truth was undeniable. The room spun as he grappled with the enormity of his situation. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to take slow, deep breaths. He needed to focus, to make sense of the memories and the world he now inhabited. He began to piece together the details from Rael's life, sifting through the fragments like an archaeologist unearthing a lost civilization. Lord Aelric was a powerful and influential figure in the Underworld, a realm where sword and magic ruled supreme, and humans, orcs, goblins, and the undead lived in a constant state of conflict. Rael had been the younger son, overshadowed by his ambitious and ruthless brother Cedric. Where Rael had been kind-hearted and compassionate, Cedric had been calculating and driven, always seeking to increase his power and influence. Rael's death had been a calculated move by Cedric to eliminate a potential rival and consolidate his claim to their father's legacy. The banquet had been the perfect cover for the treachery, the poison delivered in a toast to brotherhood and unity. As the memories settled into place, a new emotion took root within the protagonist, rage. The betrayal burned in his chest, a fire that demanded justice. As he steadied himself against the dresser, something caught his eye. A faint, glowing symbol on his wrist pulsed with a soft blue light. Intrigued, he focused on it, and to his astonishment, a series of messages appeared before his eyes, like translucent scrolls floating in the air. It was a system, a tool that allowed him to see the hidden values and potentials of those around him. System activated. User Rael. Welcome, User Rael. New abilities unlocked. Value assessment. Ability to see the hidden potential and strengths of individuals. Recruitment enhancement. Ability to persuade and recruit individuals with high potential. The implications of this system were staggering. With it, he could identify and recruit the most capable and talented individuals, building a loyal and powerful following. It was a tool that could turn the tide in his favor, a means to exact his revenge and reclaim his power. Rael, now standing before the ornate mirror, took another deep breath, attempting to quell the storm of emotions within him. The system's interface lingered in his vision, a constant reminder of the new reality he faced. He turned away from the mirror, focusing on the lavish room that surrounded him. It was clear that this was a place of wealth and power, a place where he could begin to rebuild and reclaim his life. The room itself was a testament to the opulence and authority of his new family. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, depicting epic battles and scenes of triumph. A large, polished wooden desk sat in one corner, covered in papers, maps, and books. Shelves lined with arcane tomes hinted at the magical knowledge his new father, Lord Aelric, valued. Intricate chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. As Rael surveyed his surroundings, he began to piece together more fragments of his new life. The memories that were now his to command provided glimpses of his relationships, his duties, and the expectations placed upon him as the son of a powerful noble. It was overwhelming, but he knew he had to embrace it fully if he was to succeed. A sudden knock on the door jolted him from his thoughts. He turned, instinctively reaching for the hilt of a sword that wasn't there. The door creaked open, and a young maid entered, her eyes widening in surprise upon seeing him awake. "Lord Rael, you're awake," she exclaimed, quickly regaining her composure and bowing deeply. "I must inform Lord Aelric at once." "Wait," Rael said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. The maid paused, looking at him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. What happened to me?" The maid hesitated, glancing around as if expecting someone to appear and reprimand her for speaking out of turn. "You were very ill, my lord," she said carefully. "For days, we feared you would not recover." Lord Aelric was greatly worried. Ill. The word felt inadequate to describe the betrayal and poison that had nearly ended his life. But it was a convenient cover story, one that hid the treachery within his own family. Rael nodded slowly, trying to project an air of calm authority. "Thank you. Please, fetch my father." The maid bowed again and hurried out of the room, leaving Rael alone with his thoughts once more. He paced the floor, his mind racing with plans and strategies. He had to navigate this new life carefully, using the memories and abilities he now possessed to his advantage. Minutes later, the door swung open, and a tall, imposing figure strode into the room. Lord Aelric, his father, was a man of striking presence. His hair was streaked with gray, his face weathered by years of leadership and battle. His eyes, sharp and calculating, softened slightly upon seeing Rael standing. "Rael, my son," Aelric said, his voice a deep rumble. "I feared we had lost you." Rael inclined his head respectfully. "Father, I am grateful for your concern. It seems I have been given a second chance." Aelric studied him for a moment, his gaze penetrating. "Indeed, you have been through a great ordeal, Rael. The poison was potent, but you are strong. Stronger than I realized." The words carried a weight that Rael couldn't ignore. He nodded, choosing his next words carefully. "I intend to use this second chance wisely, father. There is much I need to understand and many questions I have." Aelric's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "Of course. But first, you need to recover your strength. We will speak more when you are fully healed." He paused, then added, "Your brother will be pleased to see you up and about." Rael's stomach churned at the mention of Cedric. The memory of his brother's treacherous smile was still fresh, a stark reminder of the danger that lurked close to home. He forced a smile. "I look forward to it." Aelric nodded, then turned to leave. "Rest, my son. We will talk more soon." As the door closed behind his father, Rael sank into a nearby chair, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The system's interface still glowed faintly in his vision, reminding him of the tool he now possessed. He knew he couldn't waste time, he needed to begin planning his next steps. He closed his eyes, focusing on the system. The interface responded immediately, presenting him with a menu of options and abilities. He selected Value Assessment, curious to see how it worked. Value Assessment. Active. The world around him shifted slightly, as if a veil had been lifted. He could see faint auras around objects and people, their colors and intensity indicating their hidden potential. It was a powerful ability, one that could give him a significant advantage in identifying allies and threats. He turned his attention to the desk, where a stack of documents caught his eye. Moving closer, he saw that they were reports and correspondence from various parts of the lordship. Among them was a letter addressed to Lord Aelric, bearing the seal of a neighboring noble. He picked it up, curiosity piqued. The letter detailed recent skirmishes with a goblin tribe that had been encroaching on their lands. It mentioned a request for reinforcements and strategic advice, indicating that the situation was escalating. Rael's mind raced as he considered the implications. These were the kinds of issues he would need to address as he regained his footing. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. This time, it was Cedric who entered, his demeanor carefully controlled. "Brother," Cedric said, his voice smooth and devoid of genuine warmth. "It is good to see you up and about." Rael forced a smile, masking his true feelings. "Cedric, thank you. It's good to be back." Cedric approached, his eyes assessing. "You gave us quite a scare." "The poison was unexpected." "Indeed," Rael replied, meeting his brother's gaze with a steady one of his own. "But I am stronger for it." Cedric's smile widened slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad to hear that. We have much to discuss, especially with the recent troubles on our borders." Rael nodded. "Yes, father mentioned it. I look forward to contributing." As Cedric turned to leave, Rael activated the value assessment again, focusing on his brother. A dark aura pulsed around Cedric, filled with ambition and deceit. It confirmed what Rael already knew: Cedric was a threat that needed careful handling. Once Cedric was gone, Rael began to formulate his plans. He needed allies, and he needed them quickly. His system would allow him to identify individuals with high potential, and he knew exactly where to start. The city jail was a place where many skilled but unfortunate souls ended up. Warriors, mages, and even tacticians who had fallen out of favor or been falsely accused. If he could recruit them, he would have the beginnings of a formidable force. With this goal in mind, Rael rose from his chair, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He would start small, building his power base from the ground up. His system would guide him, helping him find those who could help him achieve his goals. As he left his chambers, he knew he had to act quickly and decisively. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but he was determined to seize this second chance. He would uncover the truth behind his poisoning, exact his revenge on Cedric, and carve out a new future for himself in this treacherous world. The first step was to gain the trust and loyalty of those who could help him. And for that, he would need to venture into the depths of the city's underbelly, where the forgotten and the forsaken awaited someone to give them a purpose. As Rael made his way through the grand halls of his father's estate, he encountered various servants and guards. Each one he passed, he discreetly used his value assessment. Most were unremarkable, their auras dim and ordinary. But a few stood out, their potential shining brightly. He made a mental note of these individuals, knowing that they could prove valuable in the future. He eventually reached the entrance to the city jail, a grim and foreboding structure that loomed over the surrounding buildings. The guards at the entrance eyed him warily but allowed him entry when he identified himself as Lord Rael. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of sweat and despair. Rows of cells lined the dimly lit corridors, each one holding prisoners of various shapes and sizes. Human, orc, goblin, and even a few undead, their faces marked by hardship and suffering. Rael moved methodically, using his value assessment on each prisoner he encountered. Most were of little interest, their potential weak or non-existent. But then he found her. In one of the deeper cells, a young woman sat with her back against the wall, her eyes closed in a meditative state. Her aura was a brilliant, vibrant hue, indicating a hidden potential that far surpassed any he had seen so far. He approached her cell, intrigued. She opened her eyes as he neared, revealing a piercing gaze that seemed to see right through him. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "My name is Rael," he replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "And I believe you have great potential." She studied him for a moment before responding. "And why should I trust you, Rael?" "Because I can offer you a chance at freedom," he said, his voice low and earnest. "A chance to use your abilities for something greater. Help me, and I will ensure you have the opportunity to achieve your true potential." She considered his words, her expression thoughtful. "What do you need from me?" "Your loyalty and your skills," he said. "I am building a force, one that will change the balance of power in this world. Join me, and you will have the chance to be part of something extraordinary." She nodded slowly, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Very well, Rael, I will join you." With his first recruit secured, Rael felt a surge of confidence. This was just the beginning. He would continue to search for those with untapped potential, building his army one person at a time. As he left the jail, he knew that his journey was far from over. There were many challenges ahead, and the path to his goals would be fraught with danger. But he was ready to face them head-on. With his new abilities and the allies he would gather, he was determined to reshape his destiny and rise to power in this treacherous world. The rebirth of Rael, son of Lord Aelric, had truly begun, and nothing would stand in his way. Chapter 2. The System. Rael stood at the gates of his father's grand estate, his mind swirling with the revelations of the past hours. His encounter with the young woman in the jail had ignited a sense of purpose within him. His new abilities, a mysterious system that allowed him to see hidden values and potential in people, were a powerful tool he intended to fully understand and exploit. He needed to dig deeper into this system, and discover its full extent and capabilities. Entering his chambers, Rael closed the door behind him and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. The faint blue symbol on his wrist seemed to pulse with his heartbeat, a constant reminder of the power now at his disposal. Sitting at his desk, he focused on the symbol, willing the system's interface to materialize before him. As he concentrated, the translucent menus and options reappeared, hovering in the air. The system was organized into various sections, each one promising a different facet of power and control. System interface. Value assessment. Assess the hidden potential and strengths of individuals. Recruitment enhancement. Persuade and recruit individuals with high potential. Resource management. Track and allocate resources effectively. Strategic planning. Develop and execute detailed plans for various objectives. Personal development. Enhance personal skills and attributes over time. Rael's eyes lingered on the personal development option. Enhancing his own skills would be crucial if he was to lead and inspire others. He selected it, and a new menu appeared, detailing various attributes he could improve: strength, agility, intelligence, charisma, and more. Each attribute had a progress bar, indicating his current level and potential for growth. He decided to focus on charisma. Charisma would be essential in persuading and leading others, and he felt it would be the cornerstone of his efforts to build a loyal following. As he concentrated on the charisma attribute, he felt a subtle warmth spread through his body, and the progress bar inched forward. The system confirmed the improvement with a soft chime, and Rael immediately felt the difference. His posture felt more confident, and his thoughts clearer and more articulate. Satisfied with his progress, Rael turned his attention to resource management. This feature provided a detailed overview of the resources at his disposal, including finances, supplies, and personnel. It even suggested optimal ways to allocate these resources to maximize efficiency and impact. Rael realized this would be invaluable in building and sustaining his power base. Next, he explored strategic planning. A map of his father's territory materialized before him, overlaid with information about key locations, threats, and opportunities. The system offered strategic advice on how to handle various situations, from diplomatic negotiations to military engagements. Rael could see how this feature would enable him to make informed decisions and outmaneuver his rivals. The more he delved into the system, the more he realized its potential. It was more than just a tool for identifying potential allies, it was a comprehensive suite for leadership and growth. But with great power came great responsibility, and he needed to use it wisely. Just as he was beginning to formulate his plans, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He quickly dismissed the system's interface and called out, "Enter." The door opened to reveal an older man with a grizzled beard and a stern expression. Captain Aemon, the head of the household guard, stepped inside and bowed. "Lord Rael, your father requests your presence in the war room." Rael nodded, rising from his chair. "Thank you, Captain. I will join him immediately." As he followed Aemon through the estate, Rael's mind raced with anticipation. The war room was where his father and his advisors discussed critical matters of strategy and governance. Being summoned there meant that Lord Aelric was involving him in serious discussions, an opportunity to prove his worth and begin implementing his plans. The war room was a large chamber dominated by a massive table, upon which lay detailed maps and miniature figurines representing various military units and fortifications. Lord Aelric stood at the head of the table, flanked by several advisors and high-ranking officers, including Cedric. "Rael," Aelric greeted him with a nod. "I'm glad you could join us. We have pressing matters to discuss." Rael inclined his head respectfully. "Of course, father. I am ready to contribute in any way I can." Aelric's gaze was piercing as he studied his son. "Good. We have received reports of increased aggression from the goblin tribes along our northern borders. They are becoming bolder, attacking our outposts and raiding villages. We must respond decisively." Rael listened carefully as the advisors outlined the situation. The goblins were not a formidable enemy on their own, but their numbers and guerrilla tactics made them a nuisance. More importantly, their attacks were disrupting trade routes and causing unrest among the populace. As the discussion continued, Rael accessed the strategic planning feature of his system, overlaying the information he received with the map in his mind. He identified key choke points where they could fortify defenses and areas where they could launch counterattacks. The system's suggestions aligned with his instincts, reinforcing his confidence. "Father," Rael spoke up, his voice steady and authoritative. "I believe we should focus on fortifying our outposts at these key locations." He pointed to several spots on the map. "By securing these positions, we can create a defensive perimeter that will protect our villages and trade routes. Additionally, we should send scouts to gather intelligence on the goblin movements and identify their main camps." Lord Aelric studied the map, his expression thoughtful. "A sound strategy, Rael. It shows promise. Captain Aemon, prepare the troops and implement these fortifications immediately. Cedric, I want you to lead the scouting parties and bring back detailed reports." Cedric's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "As you command, father." Rael watched as the orders were given, feeling a sense of accomplishment. This was just the beginning, but he had taken his first step towards proving his worth and earning his place in his father's council. As the meeting concluded, Lord Aelric approached Rael, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did well today, my son. Your insights were valuable. Continue to prove yourself, and you will find a place among my advisors." "Thank you, father," Rael replied, feeling a surge of determination. "I will not disappoint you." With the meeting over, Rael returned to his chambers, his mind buzzing with plans. He needed to build on this momentum, continuing to leverage his system's abilities to identify and recruit individuals with high potential. The next step was to venture into the city and explore the markets and guilds, seeking out those who could strengthen his cause. As he prepared for his excursion, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The memory of Cedric's hostile gaze lingered, a reminder of the danger that still loomed close to home. He would need to be cautious, always vigilant for signs of betrayal. Rael donned a simple yet elegant cloak, concealing his identity as he made his way through the bustling streets of the city. The markets were alive with activity, merchants hawking their wares and citizens going about their daily lives. He moved through the crowd with purpose, his eyes scanning for individuals who stood out. He activated his value assessment ability, allowing the auras of those around him to come into focus. Most were ordinary, their potentials unremarkable. But then he saw her, a woman with a vibrant aura, her movements graceful and confident. She was haggling with a merchant over the price of a rare potion, her sharp wit and keen intelligence evident in her negotiations. Rail approached, his interest piqued. "Excuse me, miss, I couldn't help but notice your skill in negotiation. Might I have a word with you?" The woman turned, her eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed him. "Who are you, and what do you want?" "My name is Rail," he said, offering a small bow. "And I am seeking individuals of exceptional talent to join my cause. I believe you have the potential to achieve great things." She studied him for a moment before responding. "My name is Alara. And what, exactly, is your cause?" Rail smiled, sensing an opportunity. "To build a force that can reshape this world. One where those with true potential can rise to greatness, free from the constraints of their circumstances." Alara's eyes gleamed with interest. "And what do you offer in return?" "Freedom, opportunity, and the chance to be part of something extraordinary," Rail replied. "Join me, and I will ensure you have the resources and support to achieve your true potential." Alara considered his words carefully before nodding. "Very well, Rail, I will join you, but know this, I am not one to be trifled with." "Nor am I," Rail said with a smile. "Welcome, Alara." With another valuable ally secured, Rail felt his confidence growing. He knew that there were many more talented individuals out there, waiting to be discovered and recruited. He would continue to seek them out, building his power base one person at a time. Rail's steps were deliberate as he navigated the busy streets of the city, Alara now by his side. The markets bustled with activity, a cacophony of voices and the clatter of merchant stalls filling the air. Rail's mind, however, was singularly focused. He needed more allies, and the city was brimming with untapped potential. "Where are we going?" Alara asked, her eyes scanning the crowd with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "To the slave market," Rail replied, his tone measured. "It's not ideal, but it's the best place to find individuals with hidden talents that the system can help me identify and recruit." Alara nodded, understanding the practicality of his decision even if she didn't entirely agree with it. As they walked, Rail activated his value assessment ability, letting the auras of the people around him come into focus. Most were mundane, but occasionally, he caught glimpses of brilliance, flashes of potential that shone brightly amid the sea of mediocrity. They arrived at the slave market, a grim place where despair and hope mingled in equal measure. Rows of cages and pens lined the area, filled with men, women, and even children of various races. Orcs with their muscular frames, goblins with their cunning eyes, and humans with a mix of fear and defiance. The auctioneer's voice rang out, calling bids and describing the supposed virtues of each captive. Rail's eyes scanned the rows, his system highlighting several individuals with high potential. One in particular caught his attention, a young orc with a fierce, determined gaze. His aura blazed with strength and leadership potential, a stark contrast to the despondency of those around him. Rail approached the auctioneer, a greasy man with a calculating gleam in his eye. "How much for that one?" he asked, pointing to the young orc. The auctioneer eyed Rail with interest. "Ah, you have a good eye, my lord. That one's a fighter through and through. He'll cost you 50 gold coins." Rail didn't haggle. He reached into his pouch and counted out the coins, handing them to the auctioneer. The man grinned, gesturing for his assistants to bring the orc forward. As the orc was unshackled, Rail stepped closer, meeting his intense gaze. "What's your name?" Rail asked. "Throck," the orc replied, his voice deep and resonant. "Throck, I see potential in you. Join me, and I promise you a chance to rise above this. I offer freedom, respect, and the opportunity to reclaim your honor." Throck studied Rail for a moment, as if weighing his words. Finally, he nodded. "I'll join you, but know this, I will earn my freedom through strength, not charity." Rail smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." With Throck now part of their growing group, Rail turned his attention to the other potential recruits. He spotted a goblin with a keen intellect and a human woman whose aura radiated magical potential. He approached each in turn, offering them the same promise of freedom and opportunity. By the end of the day, he had recruited several individuals, each bringing unique skills and talents to his cause. As they made their way back to the estate, Rail could feel the weight of responsibility growing. These people had placed their trust in him, and he was determined not to let them down. He needed to start training and organizing them, turning this ragtag group into a cohesive and formidable force. Upon their return, Rail gathered everyone in the estate's training yard. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grounds. He looked at the faces before him, each one reflecting a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Welcome," Rail began, his voice carrying across the yard. "You are here because you possess talents and potential that this world has yet to recognize. Together, we will build something extraordinary. But first, we must become stronger, more disciplined. From now on, you are no longer slaves or outcasts. You are warriors, mages, and leaders in training." He turned to Throck. "You will be our lead combat trainer." Use your strength and experience to mold our fighters into a formidable force. Throg nodded, a glint of pride in his eyes. Understood, my lord. Rael then addressed the human woman, whose name he had learned was Lyra. Lyra, your magical talents are vital to our success. I want you to begin training others in the use of magic. We need both offensive and defensive capabilities. Lyra inclined her head. I will do my best. Finally, he looked at the goblin, who had introduced himself as Gizrak. Gizrak, your intellect and cunning are assets. I need you to work on strategies and tactics, as well as training others in stealth and reconnaissance. Gizrak grinned, his sharp teeth gleaming. Consider it done, boss. Rael watched as his new recruits began to organize themselves, feeling a sense of accomplishment. This was just the beginning, but it was a solid foundation upon which he could build. He activated his system, checking the progress of each individual's training and potential. The system provided real-time updates, allowing him to adjust their training regimens as needed. Over the next few weeks, the training yard became a hive of activity. Throg's drills instilled discipline and strength in the fighters, while Lyra's magical lessons unlocked hidden potential in those with a knack for the arcane. Gizrak's strategies and stealth training made them more versatile and unpredictable. Rael spent his days overseeing the training, offering guidance and making use of his system to optimize their progress. He also took the time to develop his own skills, focusing on enhancing his charisma, intelligence, and strategic thinking. He knew that to lead effectively, he needed to be at his best. One evening, as the training session came to a close, Rael stood before his assembled recruits. The progress they had made was evident in their improved confidence and capability. We have come far in a short time, Rael said, his voice filled with pride. But there is still much to do. Our enemies are numerous, and the challenges ahead are great. Yet, I have faith in each of you. Together, we will overcome any obstacle. The recruits responded with cheers and determined expressions, their loyalty to Rael growing stronger with each passing day. Rael knew that their unity and resolve would be crucial in the battles to come. As the night settled in, Rael retired to his chambers, feeling the weight of leadership but also the satisfaction of progress. He accessed his system, reviewing the day's achievements and planning the next steps. The system's strategic planning feature highlighted potential threats and opportunities, guiding him in making informed decisions. One alert caught his attention, a report of increased goblin activity near the northern border. The scouts, led by Cedric, had returned with detailed information about the goblins' movements and camps. Rael studied the report, formulating a plan to counter the threat. He called for a meeting with his advisors and key recruits the next morning. As they gathered in the war room, Rael shared the scouts' findings and his proposed strategy. We will launch a preemptive strike on the goblin camps, Rael explained, pointing to the map. Throg, I want you to lead the main assault force. Lyra, prepare a team of mages to support with offensive spells. Gizrak, your reconnaissance team will provide crucial intelligence and disrupt the goblins' defenses. Each nodded, ready to execute their roles. The room buzzed with a sense of purpose and anticipation. Rael's plan was ambitious, but it was also carefully calculated. As the meeting concluded, Rael addressed the group. This mission will test our strength and unity. But I have no doubt that we will succeed. Remember, we fight not just for ourselves, but for a future where our talents and potential are recognized and rewarded. The following days were a blur of preparation and training. Rael's system provided real-time updates and suggestions, helping to refine their tactics and logistics. The recruits were focused and determined, their trust in Rael unwavering. The night before the planned assault, Rael stood alone in the training yard, the moon casting a pale light over the grounds. He reflected on how far they had come and the challenges that still lay ahead. His thoughts drifted to his father and brother, wondering how they would react to his growing influence and power. A soft rustle behind him broke his reverie. Alara approached, her expression thoughtful. You've done well, Rael. They believe in you. Rael nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. We've all worked hard. Tomorrow will be a test, but I'm confident we'll succeed. Alara stepped closer, her eyes searching his. And after that, what's next? One step at a time, Rael replied. We secure our position, build our strength, and then we start changing this world. Alara smiled, a hint of admiration in her gaze. I believe you can do it. We all do. Chapter 3. First Recruitment. The first light of dawn barely touched the spires of the city jail as Rael, Alara, and Throg approached its iron gates. Rael's heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and determination. This was the first significant test of his system's abilities in a real-world scenario, and he intended to prove its worth. The jail, a grim structure of stone and iron, seemed to swallow the light, casting long shadows that mirrored the despair within. Rael knew that within these walls were individuals who had been discarded by society, left to rot in their cells. But he also knew that some of these men and women possessed untapped potential, talents that could be harnessed for a greater cause. Are you sure about this? Alara asked, her voice tinged with concern. The jail is not a place for mercy or redemption. It's filled with those who have committed heinous crimes. Rael nodded, his expression resolute. I'm sure. The system has shown me that even here, there are diamonds in the rough. We just need to find them and give them a chance. Throck grunted his agreement, his massive form moving with a surprising grace for one so large. If they're strong and willing to fight, they can be useful. And if they betray us, we deal with them accordingly. Rael appreciated Throck's pragmatism. It was a necessary counterbalance to his own idealism. Together, they would forge a path through the darkness. The jail warden, a stout man with a permanent scowl etched into his features, met them at the entrance. His eyes flickered with curiosity and a hint of suspicion. "Lord Rael, it's unusual to see someone of your standing here. What brings you to our humble establishment?" "I'm here to recruit," Rael said simply. "There are individuals in your custody who possess unique talents. I intend to give them a chance at redemption and purpose." The warden raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "These are not mere troublemakers, my lord. Many are dangerous criminals." "I'm aware," Rael replied evenly. "But I believe in the potential for change. Show me the prisoners." The warden hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Follow me." They walked through the dimly lit corridors, the air thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and despair. Guards stood at intervals, their gazes hard and suspicious. As they moved deeper into the jail, Rael activated his value assessment ability, letting the system highlight individuals with the highest potential. Most of the prisoners had dull, lifeless auras, their potential extinguished by years of confinement and hopelessness. But one cell caught his attention. A fierce, burning aura radiated from within, a stark contrast to the surrounding despair. This was someone special, someone who could become a key player in Rael's plans. Rael stopped in front of the cell and peered through the bars. Inside sat a man in chains, his muscular frame covered in scars. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and defiance, a warrior's spirit unbroken by his imprisonment. The warden unlocked the cell door, and Rael stepped inside. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice steady and commanding. The prisoner looked up, his eyes narrowing as he assessed Rael. "Kale," he said finally. "And who are you to ask?" "I am Rael, son of Lord Aelric," Rael replied. "And I have an offer for you." Kale's eyes flickered with interest, but his expression remained guarded. "What kind of offer?" "Freedom, power, and a chance to reclaim your honor," Rael said, his voice filled with conviction. "I see potential in you, Kale. You're not meant to rot away in this cell. Join me, and I will give you the opportunity to become something greater." Kale's gaze was intense as he considered Rael's words. "And what do you want in return?" "Your loyalty and your strength," Rael replied. "I am building a force to reshape this world, and I need warriors like you to help me achieve that." Kale's eyes burned with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "And why should I trust you?" Rael stepped closer, meeting Kale's gaze head-on. "Because I believe in giving people a second chance. Because I see the potential in you that others overlook. And because I am willing to fight alongside you, not just command from a distance." For a moment, there was silence as Kale weighed his options. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, Rael. I will join you. But know this, I do not give my loyalty easily. You will have to earn it." Rael smiled. "Fair enough. Welcome to the team, Kale." The warden removed Kale's chains, and Rael led him out of the cell. As they made their way back through the jail, Rael couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had recruited a formidable warrior, one who could help him achieve his goals. Outside the jail, Rael turned to Kale. "We have a lot of work to do. You'll need to train with Throck and the others, and we'll need your strategic insights as well." Kale nodded, his expression serious. "I'll do whatever it takes." Back at the estate, Rael introduced Kale to the rest of the recruits. Throck sized him up with a critical eye, while Lyra and Gizrak offered cautious greetings. Rael could see that earning their trust would take time, but he was confident that Kale's abilities would speak for themselves. The next morning, training resumed in earnest. Throck led the combat drills, pushing the recruits to their limits. Kale's prowess quickly became evident as he sparred with Throck, matching the orc's strength and skill. Rael watched with satisfaction, knowing that Kale's addition would significantly bolster their combat capabilities. In the evenings, Rael held strategy sessions with Kale, Throck, Lyra, and Gizrak. They pored over maps and discussed tactics, planning their next moves. Kale's insights were invaluable, his experience as a warrior providing a fresh perspective on their plans. As the days passed, Rael continued to use his system to assess and enhance his recruits' abilities. He focused on building a cohesive unit, fostering camaraderie and trust among the group. He knew that their success would depend not just on their individual strengths, but on their ability to work together as a team. One afternoon, as they took a break from training, Rael gathered his key recruits for a meeting. "We've made great progress," he began, his voice filled with determination. "But we cannot afford to rest on our laurels. Our enemies are numerous, and the challenges ahead are great. We must continue to grow stronger, more united." Kale nodded, his expression resolute. "What's our next move?" Rael activated the system's strategic planning feature, projecting a map of their territory. "The goblin threat to the north is growing. We need to secure our borders and eliminate their camps. This will be our first major test as a unit." Throck's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "I'm ready for a fight." Lyra and Gizrak exchanged determined glances. "We'll do our part," Lyra said. Rael outlined their plan, assigning roles and responsibilities. Throck would lead the main assault force, while Lyra's mages provided magical support. Gizrak's reconnaissance team would gather intelligence and disrupt the goblins' defenses. Kale would serve as Rael's second-in-command, coordinating the various elements of their attack. As they finalized their preparations, Rael felt a surge of confidence. They were ready. The time had come to put their training and planning to the test. The night before the assault, Rael stood alone in the training yard, the moon casting a silvery glow over the grounds. He reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, the challenges they had overcome and the bonds they had forged. Alara approached, her expression thoughtful. "You've built something remarkable, Rael. They believe in you." Rael nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "We've all worked hard. Tomorrow will be a test, but I'm confident we'll succeed." Alara stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "And after that, what's next?" "One step at a time," Rael replied. "We secure our position, build our strength, and then we start changing this world." Alara smiled, a hint of admiration in her gaze. "I believe you can do it." "We all do." The heavy iron door creaked open, revealing the deeper recesses of the city jail, where the most dangerous and condemned prisoners were kept. The warden's torch cast flickering shadows on the damp stone walls, and the clinking of chains echoed through the narrow passage. Rael, Alara, and Throck followed closely, the tension in the air palpable. "These cells hold the worst of the worst," the warden said, his voice low. "Murderers, traitors, and those too dangerous to be allowed anywhere near the general population." Rael nodded, his eyes scanning the darkened cells. He could feel the weight of the prisoners' stares, a mix of hatred, despair, and curiosity. The system hummed to life, its familiar interface overlaying his vision. Value assessment highlighted several auras, each varying in intensity. One cell in particular caught his attention, a blazing aura of potential that stood out like a beacon in the gloom. The warden stopped in front of the cell Rael had noted. "This one is particularly dangerous," he warned. "A former captain of the city guard turned traitor. His name is Darius." Rael peered through the bars. Inside, a tall, imposing figure sat against the wall, his features obscured by shadows. His eyes, however, were clear and sharp, watching Rael with a mixture of suspicion and intrigue. "Darius," Rael called out, his voice firm but not unkind. The figure shifted, stepping into the dim light of the torch. Darius was a man of formidable presence, his face hardened by years of battle and betrayal. His muscular frame bore the marks of countless fights, and his eyes held a dangerous glint. "What do you want, boy?" Darius asked, his voice a low growl. "Come to gloat at the fallen captain?" Rael shook his head. "I'm here to offer you a way out, a chance at redemption and purpose." Darius snorted. "Redemption? You must be mad. I'm here because I crossed your father, Lord Aelric. He made sure I'd never see the light of day again. My father's judgment was harsh," Rael admitted. "But I am not my father. I see potential in you, Darius. You're not meant to waste away in this cell. Join me, and I will give you the opportunity to reclaim your honor and your freedom." Darius's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing Rael. "And why should I trust you? What makes you any different from your father?" Rael stepped closer to the bars, his gaze unwavering. "Because I believe in second chances. Because I'm willing to fight alongside you, not just command from a distance. And because I need warriors like you to help me reshape this world." For a long moment, Darius said nothing. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer but no less intense. "If I join you, it's on my terms. I won't be a puppet, and I won't tolerate betrayal." Rael nodded. "Agreed. You will be a valued member of my team, with your own autonomy and responsibilities. But know this. Loyalty and trust go both ways. Betray me, and you'll find yourself back here, or worse." Darius's lips curled into a faint smile. "Fair enough. You've got yourself a deal, Lord Rael." The warden unlocked the cell, and Darius stepped out, towering over Rael. Throck moved to stand beside Rael, his presence a silent reminder of the strength backing their leader. Alara watched with keen interest, her eyes assessing the new recruit. As they made their way out of the jail, Rael felt a sense of accomplishment. Darius was a powerful ally, one who could provide invaluable tactical insights and combat expertise. His recruitment marked a significant step forward in Rael's plans. Back at the estate, Rael introduced Darius to the rest of the team. Throck and Kale exchanged nods of mutual respect, while Lyra and Gizrak greeted him with cautious curiosity. It was clear that trust would need to be built, but Rael was confident that Darius's abilities would quickly prove his worth. Training resumed with renewed vigor. Throck led the combat drills, pushing the recruits to their limits. Darius's presence was immediately felt, his strategic mind and combat skills added a new layer of depth to their exercises. He sparred with Throck and Kale, testing their mettle and offering valuable feedback. In the evenings, Rael held strategy sessions with his key recruits. They gathered in a spacious room filled with maps, scrolls, and tactical diagrams. Darius's insights were sharp and pragmatic, his experience as a former captain providing a fresh perspective on their plans. "We need to secure our borders," Darius said one evening, his finger tracing the northern edge of their territory on a map. "The goblin camps are a significant threat. They're disorganized, but if left unchecked, they could unite and cause serious problems. Rail nodded. I agree. We'll need to conduct a reconnaissance mission first, gather intelligence on their numbers and positions. Gizrak, that's where you come in. The goblin scout grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the candlelight. Consider it done. My team and I will get the information you need. Rail outlined their plan, assigning roles and responsibilities. Throck would lead the main assault force, while Lyra's mages provided magical support. Gizrak's reconnaissance team would gather intelligence and disrupt the goblins' defenses. Kale and Darius would coordinate the various elements of the attack, ensuring a unified and effective assault. As they finalized their preparations, Rail felt a surge of confidence. They were ready. The time had come to put their training and planning to the test. The night before the assault, Rail stood alone in the training yard, the moon casting a silvery glow over the grounds. He reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, the challenges they had overcome, and the bonds they had forged. Alara approached, her expression thoughtful. You've built something remarkable, Rail. They believe in you. Rail nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. We've all worked hard. Tomorrow will be a test, but I'm confident we'll succeed. Alara stepped closer, her eyes searching his. And after that, what's next? One step at a time, Rail replied. We secure our position, build our strength, and then we start changing this world. Alara smiled, a hint of admiration in her gaze. I believe you can do it. We all do. As she walked away, Rail felt a renewed sense of determination. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but with his system and the support of his loyal allies, he was ready to face whatever challenges came his way. The foundation had been laid, and now it was time to build upon it, one victory at a time. The dawn of the assault broke with a sense of purpose and anticipation. Rail and his team gathered in the courtyard, their expressions grim and focused. The recruits, now a cohesive unit, stood ready for their first true test. Today, we make our mark, Rail said, his voice carrying over the assembled group. We've trained hard, and we've planned carefully. Now it's time to execute. Remember your roles, trust each other, and fight with everything you have. Victory will be ours. A chorus of determined voices responded, and Rail felt a surge of pride. They were ready. The assault began with Gizrak's reconnaissance team slipping into the goblin territory under the cover of darkness. Their mission was to gather intelligence and sow confusion among the goblin ranks. Gizrak moved like a shadow, his keen eyes and sharp ears picking up every detail. His team disrupted supply lines, sabotaged weapons caches, and left false trails to mislead the goblins. As dawn approached, Rail's main force moved into position. Throck led the vanguard, his massive form a fearsome sight as he brandished his battle axe. Lyra's mages took up positions on the flanks, ready to unleash their spells. Kale and Darius coordinated the movements, ensuring that every unit was in place. The battle began with a coordinated strike. Throck's vanguard charged into the goblin camp, their war cries echoing through the valley. Lyra's mages unleashed a barrage of fire and lightning, devastating the goblin defenses. Gizrak's team continued their disruptions, striking from the shadows and disappearing before the goblins could react. Rail fought alongside his men, his sword flashing in the early light. He moved with a purpose, his mind focused on the battle and the greater goal. The system's tactical overlays guided his actions, highlighting key targets and providing real-time feedback. The goblins, caught off guard and disorganized, struggled to mount a defense. Rail's forces pressed the advantage, cutting through the enemy lines with precision and determination. Throck's brute strength, Lyra's magical prowess, and Darius's tactical acumen combined to create a devastatingly effective force. As the battle raged, Rail felt a sense of exhilaration. This was what he had trained for, what he had planned for. The chaos of the battlefield, the clash of steel, the surge of magic, it all came together in a symphony of war. Hours later, as the sun reached its zenith, the battle was won. The goblin camp lay in ruins, their forces scattered and broken. Rail's men stood victorious, their faces a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Rail surveyed the battlefield, his heart swelling with pride. This was just the beginning. With each victory, their strength and unity would grow. The path to reshaping the world was long and arduous, but with his system and the support of his loyal allies, Rail knew they were on the right track. He turned to his key recruits, their expressions reflecting the same determination and resolve. Today, we've proven what we can achieve together. But this is just the start. We have much more to do, and many more battles to fight. But I have no doubt that we will succeed. Together, we will change this world. Chapter 4. Gathering Allies. The aftermath of their victory against the goblins had cemented Rail's leadership and bolstered the morale of his growing forces. However, Rail knew that to truly reshape the world, he needed more than just a formidable army. He needed allies, individuals with unique skills and potential who could strengthen his cause. His next target was the slave market, a grim and brutal place, but one that held untapped potential. The slave market was located on the outskirts of the city, a seedy district where desperate souls were bought and sold like livestock. Rail, disguised in a cloak to avoid drawing attention, made his way through the narrow, dirty streets. Alara and Gizrak accompanied him, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of trouble. "We need to be careful here," Alara whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the market. "The Slavers are ruthless, and they won't take kindly to us disrupting their business." Rael nodded, his expression serious. "I know, but this is where we'll find those who have been overlooked, those with the potential to change the course of their lives, and ours." As they approached the heart of the market, the noise grew louder. Merchants shouted their wares, and the cries of the enslaved echoed through the air. Rael felt a surge of anger at the sight, men, women, and even children shackled and displayed like cattle. He forced himself to stay focused, knowing that his emotions would not help him here. Activating his value assessment ability, Rael let the system's overlay guide his vision. Among the sea of despairing faces, a few auras shone brightly, indicating high potential. These were the individuals he sought, those who could become valuable allies in his quest. The first aura led Rael to a young woman, her eyes burning with defiance despite her chains. Her name, the slaver barked, was Serafina, a mage of considerable talent who had been captured and sold into slavery after her village was destroyed. Her aura glowed with a deep, vibrant energy, marking her as someone with significant magical potential. Rael approached the slaver, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "I'm interested in this one," he said, pointing to Serafina. The slaver, a greasy man with a crooked smile, eyed Rael suspiciously. "She's not cheap, stranger. Powerful mages fetch a high price." Rael pulled out a pouch of gold, enough to satisfy the slaver's greed. "I'll pay the price, but I want to speak to her first." The slaver's eyes gleamed with avarice as he took the gold. "As you wish, but make it quick." Rael stepped closer to Serafina, his voice low. "I'm here to offer you a chance at freedom and purpose. Join me, and you'll never be a slave again." Serafina's eyes narrowed, suspicion warring with hope. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I believe in your potential," Rael replied. "And because I need your skills. Together, we can change this world." After a moment of hesitation, Serafina nodded. "I'll join you, but know this, I won't tolerate betrayal." Rael smiled. "Nor will I." With Serafina's chains removed, Rael moved on, guided by the system to his next target. This time, it was a young man named Amon, a skilled blacksmith who had been enslaved after falling into debt. His aura shone with a steady, reliable light, indicating his potential as a craftsman and a leader. The slaver in charge of Amon was more difficult to negotiate with, demanding an exorbitant price. Rael, however, remained patient and persuasive, eventually securing Amon's freedom. Like Serafina, Amon agreed to join Rael's cause, grateful for the opportunity to rebuild his life and use his skills for a greater purpose. As they continued through the market, Rael's entourage grew. Each individual he recruited added a unique set of skills to their growing group. There was Keita, a former thief with unparalleled agility and stealth, Bran, a warrior who had been betrayed and sold into slavery by his comrades, and Nessa, a healer whose abilities had been exploited by her captors. By the time they left the market, Rael had gathered a small but diverse group of highly skilled individuals. Each one had suffered under the yoke of slavery, but now, they had a chance to reclaim their lives and fight for a cause greater than themselves. Back at the estate, Rael introduced the new recruits to his core team. Throck, Kale, Darius, Lyra, and Gizrak welcomed them cautiously, aware that trust would take time to build. However, the shared experience of fighting for their freedom and the promise of a better future created an immediate bond. Training sessions were adjusted to accommodate the new skills and talents. Serafina joined Lyra in honing their magical abilities, while Amon worked with the blacksmiths to improve their weapons and armor. Keita's agility made her an invaluable scout, while Bran's combat skills added to their frontline strength. Nessa's healing abilities ensured that their forces could recover quickly from injuries. One evening, as the recruits gathered around a campfire, Rael addressed them. "You've all been through hardships, but now, we have the chance to forge a new path. We are more than just an army. We are a family, bound by our shared goal to reshape this world. Each of you brings something unique to our cause, and together, we are unstoppable." The recruits nodded, their faces reflecting a mix of determination and hope. They had been given a second chance, and they were ready to seize it. As the night wore on, Rael found himself alone, reflecting on the day's events. Alara approached, her expression thoughtful. "You've gathered quite a group," she said. "Each one of them has the potential to make a significant impact." Rael nodded. "I believe in them, and I believe that together, we can achieve great things." Alara smiled, her eyes filled with admiration. "You have a way of seeing the best in people, Rael. It's a rare and valuable trait." "Thank you," Rael replied. "But I know we have a long road ahead. There will be many challenges, and we must be prepared for them." Alara's smile faded slightly, her expression turning serious. "We will be. With you leading us, I have no doubt that we will succeed." As she walked away, Rael felt a renewed sense of determination. The path to reshaping the world was long and fraught with danger, but with each step, they grew stronger. The foundation was being laid, one ally at a time, and Rael knew that together, they would build a future worth fighting for. The next day, training resumed with increased intensity. The new recruits quickly integrated into the existing structure, their skills enhancing the overall effectiveness of the group. Serafina and Lyra worked tirelessly to improve their magical defenses, while Eamon and his team crafted new weapons and armor. Kada and Gizrak coordinated reconnaissance missions, gathering vital intelligence on their enemies. Rael continued to use his system to assess and enhance his recruits' abilities. The more he used it, the more he understood its intricacies and potential. He could see not only their current capabilities but also their potential growth paths, allowing him to tailor their training and assignments to maximize their effectiveness. As the days passed, the group's cohesion grew. Trust and camaraderie developed naturally, forged through shared experiences and a common goal. Rael knew that their unity would be their greatest strength in the battles to come. One evening, Rael gathered his key recruits for a strategy session. They sat around a large table, maps and documents spread out before them. "We've made significant progress," Rael began, his voice steady and confident. "But we cannot afford to become complacent. Our enemies are numerous, and we must continue to grow stronger." Throck grunted in agreement. "What's our next move?" Rael activated the system's strategic planning feature, projecting a detailed map of their territory. "Our scouts have identified several key locations that could provide strategic advantages. We need to secure these areas and fortify our defenses." Kale leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "And what about our enemies? The goblins were just the beginning. There are other factions that will not take kindly to our rise." "Indeed," Rael agreed. "We need to be proactive, not just reactive. We must identify and neutralize potential threats before they have a chance to strike." Darius nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Agreed. We need to gather more intelligence, understand our enemy's strengths and weaknesses." Gizrak grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the candlelight. "Leave that to me and Kada. We'll get the information you need." As Rael's newly recruited team integrated into their ranks, he knew the next step was to strengthen their forces even further. The slave market had provided him with individuals of extraordinary potential, but there were still more who could be brought into their fold. His system had hinted at another group of high-value individuals hidden within the city, the defeated warriors and mages who had been imprisoned. Their abilities were invaluable, and Rael intended to liberate and recruit them. The prison, a massive stone fortress, loomed on the horizon as Rael and his team approached under the cover of darkness. The air was thick with tension, each member of Rael's party fully aware of the risks involved. Gizrak had scouted the area earlier, mapping out the guard patterns and identifying the weak points in the fortress's defenses. "We'll need to move quickly and quietly," Rael instructed, his voice barely a whisper. "Our objective is to reach the cells holding the most skilled prisoners. Free them, and convince them to join our cause." Alara, Kada, and Gizrak nodded, their expressions serious. Throck and Darius were tasked with creating a diversion to draw the guards away from the main entrance, giving the rest of the team a window to infiltrate the fortress. Throck and Darius moved to their positions, each equipped with a set of explosives crafted by Eamon. As the first explosion echoed through the night, the fortress guards scrambled to respond, leaving their posts and rushing towards the source of the commotion. Rael signaled for his team to move. They slipped through the shadows, reaching the now unattended main entrance. Kada took the lead, her agility and stealth allowing her to disable the remaining guards silently. Once inside, Rael activated his system, scanning the fortress for the high-value targets. "The most powerful prisoners are held in the lower levels," Rael whispered, the system's interface guiding him through the maze-like corridors. "We need to move fast." They descended into the bowels of the fortress, encountering minimal resistance thanks to Throck and Darius's diversion. As they reached the lower levels, the air grew colder, the dampness and darkness oppressive. The system highlighted several cells where the prisoners with the highest potential were held. Rael approached the first cell, peering through the bars. Inside was a man with a muscular build, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. The system identified him as Torin, a warrior of unmatched strength who had been captured during a failed rebellion. "Torin," Rael called softly, drawing the man's attention. "I'm here to offer you freedom and a chance to fight for a greater cause." Torin's eyes narrowed. "Who are you, and why should I trust you?" "I am Rael, the son of Lord Aelric," Rael replied. "I was given a second chance at life, and I intend to use it to unite the races and bring justice to this land. Join me, and together we can overthrow those who have wronged you." Torin studied Rael for a moment before nodding. "Very well, I'll join you, but if you betray me, you'll regret it." Rael smiled, unlocking the cell door with a key ring he had taken from a guard. "I expect nothing less." With Torin freed, they moved to the next cell. Inside was a woman with a fierce demeanor, her eyes glowing faintly with magical energy. The system identified her as Liana, a powerful mage who had been captured while defending her homeland. "Liana," Rael said, his voice steady, "I can offer you a chance at freedom and a new purpose. Will you join us?" Liana's eyes flickered with interest. "What do you offer that others have not?" "The opportunity to use your powers for a cause that matters," Rael replied. "To fight against those who have oppressed you and to help shape a better future." After a moment's hesitation, Liana nodded. "I will join you, but know this, I will not be used as a tool." Rail unlocked her cell, his determination unwavering. You will be an equal, not a tool. We fight together. With Torin and Liana freed, they continued to the remaining cells, releasing several other skilled individuals, including a master archer named Aldrich and a healer named Meles. Each recruit was given the same offer: freedom, purpose, and a chance to fight for a greater cause. As they made their way back to the fortress entrance, the sound of battle echoed through the corridors. Throck and Darius had engaged the remaining guards, ensuring the path to freedom was clear. Rail and his team joined the fray, their combined skills overwhelming the guards. Once outside the fortress, they regrouped, each member catching their breath as they prepared to return to their base. Rail could see the gratitude and determination in the eyes of the newly freed prisoners. They had been given a second chance, just as he had, and they were ready to fight for their freedom. As they made their way back to the estate, Rail addressed his new recruits. You have all been through unimaginable hardships, but now, you have a chance to reclaim your lives and fight for a cause that matters. Together, we can bring about the change this world desperately needs. Torin, standing at the front of the group, nodded. We're with you, Rail. Lead us to victory. Back at the estate, the new recruits were integrated into the training regimen. Torin's strength and combat skills made him a natural leader among the warriors, while Liana's magical prowess complemented Serafina's abilities. Aldrich's archery skills and Melis's healing abilities added to the overall effectiveness of the group. Rail continued to use his system to assess and enhance his recruits' abilities, tailoring their training to maximize their potential. The system's insights allowed him to create specialized training programs for each individual, ensuring that they were not only effective but also motivated. One evening, Rail gathered his core team and the new recruits for a strategy meeting. We've made significant progress, he began, his voice filled with confidence. But we cannot stop here. Our enemies are still out there, and we must continue to grow stronger. Throck grunted in agreement. What's our next move? Rail activated the system's strategic planning feature, projecting a detailed map of their territory. Our scouts have identified several key locations that could provide strategic advantages. We need to secure these areas and fortify our defenses. Kale leaned forward, his eyes sharp. And what about our enemies? We need to be proactive, not just reactive. Agreed, Rail replied. We must identify and neutralize potential threats before they have a chance to strike. As they finalized their plans, Rail felt a sense of satisfaction. They were ready for the next phase of their journey. The foundation had been laid, and now it was time to build upon it, one victory at a time. The next morning, training resumed with increased intensity. The new recruits quickly integrated into the existing structure, their skills enhancing the overall effectiveness of the group. Torin led the warriors in rigorous combat drills, while Liana and Serafina worked together to enhance their magical defenses. Aldrich and Kada coordinated reconnaissance missions, gathering vital intelligence on their enemies. Rail continued to use his system to assess and enhance his recruits' abilities. The more he used it, the more he understood its intricacies and potential. He could see not only their current capabilities but also their potential growth paths, allowing him to tailor their training and assignments to maximize their effectiveness. As the days passed, the group's cohesion grew. Trust and camaraderie developed naturally, forged through shared experiences and a common goal. Rail knew that their unity would be their greatest strength in the battles to come. One evening, Rail gathered his key recruits for a strategy session. They sat around a large table, maps and documents spread out before them. We've made significant progress, Rail began, his voice steady and confident. But we cannot afford to become complacent. Our enemies are numerous, and we must continue to grow stronger. Throck grunted in agreement. What's our next move? Rail activated the system's strategic planning feature, projecting a detailed map of their territory. Our scouts have identified several key locations that could provide strategic advantages. We need to secure these areas and fortify our defenses. Kale leaned forward, his eyes sharp. And what about our enemies? The goblins were just the beginning. There are other factions that will not take kindly to our rise. Indeed, Rail agreed. We need to be proactive, not just reactive. We must identify and neutralize potential threats before they have a chance to strike. Darius nodded, his expression thoughtful. Agreed. We need to gather more intelligence, understand our enemy's strengths and weaknesses. Gizrak grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the candlelight. Leave that to me and Kada. We'll get the information you need. Chapter 5. Building the team. Rail's burgeoning group of allies had already started to change the dynamic within his father's city. The foundation of his plan required not just strength in numbers but expertise in key areas. He needed magic to complement their physical prowess and someone who could see the big picture in ways that others could not. With his system guiding him, he set out to find the individuals who could fill these crucial roles. The first recruit on Rail's list was a skilled mage. The city had a few notable magic users, but one, in particular, stood out in the system's assessment. Her name was Serafina, a reclusive sorceress known for her elemental magic. She had kept a low profile after her family was unjustly accused of treason and executed. Since then, Serafina had lived in seclusion, wary of the world and those in power. Rael and a small contingent of his trusted allies, including Alara and Keita, ventured to the outskirts of the city where Serafina resided. Her home was a modest cottage surrounded by a thick grove of ancient trees, a natural barrier that deterred most visitors. "Are you sure she'll join us?" Keita asked, her eyes scanning the tree line for any signs of danger. Rael nodded, his system indicating high potential and a high level of distrust and authority. "We have to convince her that our cause is just and that we're different from those who wronged her." Alara stepped forward, her keen senses attuned to any magical traps or wards. "I'll go ahead and make sure it's safe," she offered. After a thorough inspection, Alara signaled that it was clear, and they approached the cottage. Rael knocked on the door, hoping that Serafina would be willing to listen. The door creaked open slightly, revealing a pair of sharp, emerald eyes. "Who are you, and what do you want?" a voice demanded, filled with suspicion and a hint of weariness. "I am Rael, son of Lord Aelric," Rael began, keeping his tone respectful. "I've come to seek your aid in a cause that seeks to unite the races and bring justice to this land." The door opened a bit wider, and Serafina stepped into view. She was a striking woman with fiery red hair and a commanding presence. "Why should I trust you, a lord's son? Your kind has brought nothing but suffering to my family." Rael met her gaze steadily. "I understand your distrust, and I don't blame you for it. But I am not like the others. I was betrayed by my own family and given a second chance. I intend to use it to make things right. Join us, and we can bring about the change this world needs." Serafina studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his for any signs of deceit. Finally, she stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. "You may come in. Let's discuss this further." Inside, the cottage was cozy, filled with the scent of herbs and the faint glow of magical artifacts. Rael and his companions took seats around a wooden table, and Serafina joined them, her expression still guarded. "What exactly are you proposing?" Serafina asked, folding her arms. Rael took a deep breath. "We're building an alliance of skilled individuals to fight against the corruption and injustice that plagues this land. We need your magical expertise to strengthen our forces and protect our people." Serafina's eyes narrowed. "And what do you offer in return?" "A place where you can practice your magic freely, without fear of persecution," Rael replied. "A chance to avenge your family and bring those responsible to justice. And, most importantly, a role in shaping the future of this land." Serafina considered his words, her gaze intense. After a long silence, she finally nodded. "Very well, Rael, I will join you, but know this. I will not tolerate any betrayal or deceit. If you prove untrustworthy, I will not hesitate to leave." Rael smiled, relief flooding through him. "You have my word, Serafina. We will build a better world together." With Serafina on board, Rael's team had gained a powerful new member. Her expertise in elemental magic would be invaluable in both offensive and defensive strategies. Over the following days, Serafina integrated into the group, her magical prowess impressing everyone. She and Leona quickly formed a strong bond, their combined magical abilities creating formidable defenses and potent attacks. Rael continued to use his system to assess and enhance Serafina's capabilities, ensuring that she reached her full potential. The synergy between the magic users and the warriors grew stronger, creating a balanced and effective fighting force. As they trained and planned, Rael knew that the next step was just as crucial: finding a strategist who could help them navigate the complex political landscape and devise strategies for their upcoming battles. The system had already highlighted a potential candidate, someone with a brilliant mind and a knack for tactics. After a few days of preparation, Rael felt ready to set out in search of this individual. The target was Alistair, a former military officer who had been disgraced and exiled after refusing to follow corrupt orders. Since his exile, Alistair had been living in the shadows, using his tactical skills to survive. Rael, accompanied by Gizrak and Throck, set out to find Alistair. The trail led them to a bustling tavern in the city's underbelly, a place where the downtrodden and the exiled found refuge. The air was thick with the scent of ale and the murmur of hushed conversations. "Stay alert," Rael cautioned his companions as they entered the tavern. "Alistair is known to be wary of strangers." Gizrak grinned, his sharp eyes scanning the room. "Don't worry, Rael, we'll find him." They moved through the crowded space, Rael using his system to identify Alistair's location. Eventually, they spotted him in a dimly lit corner, nursing a tankard of ale. He was a lean man with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Rael approached cautiously, signaling for Gizrak and Throck to stay back. "Alistair," he greeted, keeping his voice low. Alistair looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Who's asking?" "I am Rael, son of Lord Aelric," Rael replied, offering a slight bow. "I've come to seek your expertise in strategy and tactics. We are building an alliance to fight against the corruption and injustice in this land." Alistair's expression remained guarded. "And why should I help a lord's son? Your kind are the ones responsible for my exile." Rael met his gaze steadily. "I understand your mistrust. I was betrayed by my own family and given a second chance. I intend to use it to bring about change. Join us, and you can use your skills to fight for a just cause." Alistair studied him for a long moment, then took a sip of his ale. You talk a good game, Rail. But words are cheap. Why should I believe you? Because I am offering you a chance to make a difference, Rail replied. To use your skills for something greater than yourself. And because I need someone with your abilities to help us navigate the battles ahead. Alistair leaned back, considering. Finally, he nodded. Very well. I'll join you, but know this. If you prove to be like the rest of them, I'll leave without a second thought. Rail smiled, relief washing over him. You have my word, Alistair. We will fight for a better future together. With Alistair now part of the team, Rail's group had gained a crucial member. Alistair's tactical genius quickly became apparent as he began analyzing their current plans and suggesting improvements. He worked closely with Rail, Serafina, and the others, devising strategies that maximized their strengths and minimized their weaknesses. Over the following days, Alistair's presence brought a new level of discipline and organization to the group. He drilled the recruits in various combat scenarios, preparing them for the battles to come. His tactical insights allowed them to plan more effectively, ensuring that they were always one step ahead of their enemies. Rail continued to use his system to assess and enhance Alistair's capabilities, ensuring that his strategic acumen was fully utilized. The synergy between the strategist and the rest of the team grew stronger, creating a cohesive and effective fighting force. With Serafina and Alistair now part of his growing team, Rail felt the momentum shifting in their favor. However, to truly solidify their power base and prepare for the conflicts ahead, he knew they needed a diverse set of skills and perspectives. The next step in his plan was to find a cunning strategist who could help them outthink their enemies and navigate the treacherous political landscape. The system had highlighted a former noblewoman named Lysandra, renowned for her intelligence and cunning. Once a respected advisor at court, she had fallen from grace after being falsely accused of treason. Now, she lived in obscurity, using her wits to survive in a world that had turned its back on her. Rail, Serafina, and Alistair set out to find Lysandra. Their journey took them to a decrepit part of the city, where the once glorious estates of nobles now stood in ruins, abandoned and forgotten. They found Lysandra in a small, rundown house at the edge of this desolate area. Rail knocked on the door, his heart racing with anticipation. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-30s, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through him. Her clothes were simple, but there was an air of dignity and intelligence about her that marked her as someone who had once held a position of power. Who are you, and what do you want? Lysandra's voice was cold and guarded, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of the three visitors. I am Rail, son of Lord Aelric, Rail began, choosing his words carefully. I've come to seek your expertise in strategy and cunning. We are building an alliance to fight against the corruption and injustice that plague this land. Lysandra's gaze flicked to Serafina and Alistair, then back to Rail. A lord's son seeking the help of a disgraced advisor? This is either a desperate move or a cunning ploy. Why should I trust you? Rail stepped forward, his expression earnest. Because I was betrayed by my own family and given a second chance. I intend to use it to make things right. We need your intelligence and strategic mind to help us navigate the battles ahead. Join us, and you can help shape the future of this land. Lysandra studied him for a long moment, then finally stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. Very well. Come inside, and let's discuss this further. The interior of the house was modest but well kept, with shelves lined with books and scrolls. It was clear that Lysandra valued knowledge and had spent her time in exile studying and honing her skills. She led them to a small sitting area and gestured for them to sit. What exactly are you proposing? Lysandra asked, folding her arms as she leaned against a bookshelf. Rail took a deep breath. We are building an alliance of skilled individuals to fight against the corruption and injustice in this land. We need your expertise to help us devise strategies and outmaneuver our enemies. In return, we offer you a chance to reclaim your honor and play a crucial role in shaping a just and unified kingdom. Lysandra's eyes flickered with interest, but she remained cautious. And how do I know you won't betray me like others have? I've been burned before, and I won't be so easily fooled again. Serafina stepped forward, her voice calm and reassuring. We understand your mistrust, Lysandra. But Rail is different. He has already proven his commitment to our cause by recruiting those who have also been wronged and giving them a chance to fight for justice. We believe in him, and we believe in you. Alistair nodded in agreement. Your skills and intelligence are exactly what we need. Together, we can create a better future for all of us. Lysandra's gaze softened slightly, and she seemed to be weighing their words carefully. Finally, she nodded. Very well, I will join you, but know this. I will not tolerate any deceit or betrayal. If you prove untrustworthy, I will leave without a second thought. Rail smiled, relief flooding through him. You have my word, Lysandra. We will build a better world together. With Lysandra now part of the team, Rail's group had gained a vital new member. Her intelligence and strategic acumen quickly became apparent as she began analyzing their current plans and suggesting improvements. She worked closely with Alistair, her keen mind complementing his tactical expertise. Over the following days, Lysandra's presence brought a new level of sophistication to their strategies. She and Alistair formed a formidable duo, their combined insights allowing them to devise plans that maximized their strengths and minimized their weaknesses. They drilled the recruits in various combat scenarios, preparing them for the battles to come. Rail continued to use his system to assess and enhance Lissandra's capabilities, ensuring that her intelligence and strategic skills were fully utilized. The synergy between the strategist and the rest of the team grew stronger, creating a cohesive and effective fighting force. One evening, as they gathered around a map of the region, Lissandra pointed to a key location. "This fortress here is crucial. If we can take it, we'll have a strong defensive position and a base of operations. It will also disrupt our enemy's supply lines and give us a strategic advantage." Alistair nodded, studying the map. "Agreed, but it's heavily fortified. We'll need a precise plan to take it without suffering heavy losses." Serafina leaned in, her eyes glowing with magical energy. "I can use my magic to create a diversion, draw their forces away from the main gate. That should give our troops the opening they need." Rail listened to their discussion, his heart swelling with pride. His team was coming together, each member contributing their unique skills and insights. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. As they continued to plan, Rail felt a sense of purpose and determination like never before. He had been given a second chance, and he was determined to use it to create a better world. With Serafina's magical prowess, Alistair's tactical genius, and Lissandra's strategic brilliance, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The vision of a united kingdom, where all races lived in harmony, drove them forward. Rail knew that their journey would be long and fraught with danger, but with his allies by his side, he felt confident that they could achieve their goal. The days turned into weeks, and their preparations continued. Rail's group trained tirelessly, honing their skills and perfecting their strategies. The bond between them grew stronger, forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. They were no longer just a group of individuals, they were a team, united in their quest for justice and a better future. As they stood on the brink of their first major campaign, Rail looked out at his assembled allies. "We have come a long way, but our journey is just beginning," he said, his voice strong and unwavering. "Together, we will face whatever challenges come our way. Together, we will build a better world." Chapter 6. Training begins. The dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden hue over the training grounds just outside the city. Rail stood at the edge of the field, surveying his new recruits. The diverse group, now a mix of warriors, mages, strategists, and former slaves, had gathered to begin their journey towards becoming a formidable force. Today marked the start of their intense training regime, a critical step in preparing for the battles ahead. Rail's heart swelled with pride and determination as he looked at his assembled forces. They were rough around the edges, many still carrying the scars of their past hardships, but there was a glimmer of hope and resolve in their eyes. He knew that with the right training and guidance, they could become a powerful army capable of challenging the corrupt forces that plagued their land. At Rail's side stood Serafina, Alistair, and Lissandra, each ready to take on their roles in the training process. Serafina's fiery red hair was tied back, her eyes glowing with anticipation. Alistair's stern expression and military bearing contrasted with Lissandra's calculated gaze and calm demeanor. Together, they represented the blend of strength, strategy, and magic that would be instilled in their recruits. "Listen up, everyone." Rail's voice rang out across the field, commanding attention. "Today, we begin the training that will forge you into the warriors, mages, and strategists this land needs. Our path will be hard and filled with challenges, but if we stand together, we can achieve great things." The recruits, a mix of humans, orcs, goblins, and a few undead, straightened their postures, their eyes fixed on Rail. He could see the doubt and skepticism in some of their faces, but he also saw the spark of determination in others. Alistair stepped forward, his authoritative presence immediately commanding respect. "I am Alistair, your chief tactician and combat instructor. Our training will be rigorous and demanding. You will learn to fight as a unit, to trust each other, and to harness your individual strengths for the greater good." He motioned to Serafina, who stepped up next. "I am Serafina, your magical instructor. For those with magical abilities, we will hone your skills and teach you to work in concert with your comrades. Magic is a powerful tool, but only when used with precision and control." Lissandra was the last to speak, her voice calm and measured. "I am Lissandra, and I will teach you the art of strategy and cunning. Understanding your enemy, planning your moves, and outthinking your foes are just as important as strength and magic. Together, we will create a force that cannot be easily defeated." With the introductions complete, the training began in earnest. The recruits were divided into groups based on their primary skills and potential as indicated by Rail's system. Alistair took charge of the physical training, putting the warriors through grueling drills that tested their endurance, strength, and combat techniques. They practiced formations, hand-to-hand combat, and weapon handling, each session pushing them to their limits. Rail watched as Alistair barked commands, his experienced eyes picking out the weaknesses in each recruit's technique and correcting them with brutal efficiency. There were moments of frustration and exhaustion, but Alistair's firm yet fair approach began to earn the respect of even the most skeptical recruits. In another part of the field, Serafina gathered the mages and those with magical potential. She began with basic exercises to gauge their control and proficiency with various elements. The air crackled with energy as fire, ice, and lightning were summoned and controlled under her watchful eye. She emphasized the importance of discipline and control, teaching them to channel their magic with precision rather than raw power. One of the mages, a young woman named Alara, showed particular promise. Her control over ice magic was impressive, and she quickly became one of Serafina's star pupils. Rael noted this with satisfaction, knowing that having skilled magic users like Alara would be crucial in their future battles. Lysandra, meanwhile, held strategy sessions with a smaller group of recruits who showed potential in tactical thinking. They pored over maps and scenarios, discussing various strategies and learning to anticipate their enemies' moves. Lysandra's sharp mind and experience in court politics provided invaluable insights, and her students quickly began to grasp the complexities of warfare beyond brute force. Rael himself moved between the groups, using his system to monitor the progress of each recruit and provide encouragement and guidance where needed. He could see the changes taking place, the hesitation in their movements giving way to confidence, their once individualistic tendencies beginning to merge into a cohesive unit. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Rael gathered everyone together for a midday break. The recruits, though tired and sweaty, were starting to bond over their shared experiences. Rael could see friendships forming and rivalries being set aside in favor of mutual respect and camaraderie. "You're doing well," Rael said as he addressed them. "This is just the beginning, but already I see great potential in all of you. Remember why you're here and what we're fighting for. We are not just training soldiers, we are building a family, a force that will stand together against any foe." The recruits cheered, their spirits lifted by Rael's words. They were beginning to believe in his vision, and that belief would be the cornerstone of their strength. In the afternoon, the training resumed with even greater intensity. Alistair introduced complex combat drills that required coordination and trust among the recruits. They sparred in pairs and small groups, learning to rely on each other's strengths and cover each other's weaknesses. Mistakes were made, and bruises were earned, but with each passing hour, their skills improved. Serafina took her mages through advanced magical exercises, pushing them to expand their abilities and think creatively about how to use their powers in combat. She encouraged them to experiment with combining different elements and to think of magic not just as a weapon, but as a tool for problem-solving and support. Lysandra's strategy sessions became more intense as well. She introduced simulated battles, challenging her students to devise plans and counter-plans. They learned to think several steps ahead, to anticipate the enemy's moves and to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. Rael joined these sessions often, his system providing valuable insights that he shared with the group. As the day drew to a close, Rael gathered his key advisors, Serafina, Alistair, and Lysandra, for a debriefing. They discussed the progress made and identified areas that needed further attention. It was clear that the training was beginning to bear fruit, but there was still a long way to go. "We've made a good start," Alistair said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "But we need to keep pushing them. The real test will come when they face an actual enemy." Serafina nodded in agreement. "Their magical abilities are improving, but we need to ensure they can maintain control under pressure. We should start incorporating real-world scenarios into their training," Lysandra added, "and we need to continue honing their strategic thinking. Understanding the battlefield and being able to adapt is crucial. We should start introducing more complex scenarios and unexpected challenges." Rael listened carefully, his mind already formulating the next steps. "Agreed. We'll intensify the training and start integrating more realistic combat simulations. Our goal is to prepare them for anything they might face. We need to be ready for the unexpected." The following days saw the training regimen becoming even more demanding. The recruits were pushed to their limits and beyond, their bodies and minds tested in ways they had never experienced before. But with each challenge they overcame, they grew stronger and more unified. Rael continued to monitor their progress, using his system to provide targeted guidance and support. He could see the transformation taking place before his eyes. What had once been a disparate group of individuals was becoming a disciplined and cohesive unit, ready to face the challenges ahead. As the sun set on another day of training, Rael looked out over his recruits with a sense of pride and hope. They were not just preparing for battle, they were building a future where justice and unity would prevail. And with each passing day, that future seemed a little bit closer. By the end of the week, the recruits had started to form bonds of trust and camaraderie. They learned to move as one, their diverse backgrounds and abilities complementing each other in ways that Rael had hoped for. The training was arduous, but it was necessary. Rael knew that they were on the right path, and the foundation they were building would be crucial in the battles to come. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of training, Rael called the recruits together. They gathered around a large fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on their tired but determined faces. Rael stepped forward, his voice carrying a mixture of authority and empathy. "I know this has been difficult. You've been pushed to your limits and beyond. But remember, every drop of sweat, every moment of pain, is a step towards our goal. You are becoming stronger, not just as individuals, but as a united force. We are preparing for something much greater than ourselves. He looked around at his recruits, seeing the flicker of understanding in their eyes. We are not just an army, we are a family. We will stand together, fight together, and build a future together. And when the time comes, we will be ready. As the days passed, Rael's recruits grew stronger, both individually and as a cohesive unit. The intense training regimen pushed them to their limits, but it also forged bonds of camaraderie and trust among them. They began to see themselves not just as individuals, but as part of something greater, a united force with a shared purpose. Under Alistair's guidance, the warriors honed their combat skills, learning to fight as a cohesive unit. They practiced formations, maneuvers, and tactics, each session bringing them closer together as a team. Alistair pushed them hard, but he also instilled in them a sense of discipline and pride in their abilities. Serafina's mages continued to refine their magical skills, delving into the intricacies of spellcasting and elemental control. They learned to harness their powers with precision and control, understanding that their magic was a tool to be used wisely and not recklessly. Serafina encouraged them to experiment and innovate, pushing the boundaries of their abilities. Lysandra's strategy sessions became more intense as well, with the recruits facing increasingly complex scenarios and challenges. They learned to think on their feet, to adapt their plans to changing circumstances, and to anticipate their enemies' moves. Lysandra's sharp mind and strategic insights were invaluable, and the recruits quickly learned to trust her judgment. Rael moved among the groups, observing their progress and offering guidance where needed. His system helped him identify the strengths and weaknesses of each recruit, allowing him to tailor his advice to their individual needs. He could see the transformation taking place, the once disparate group of recruits becoming a disciplined and unified force. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rael called the recruits together for a special session. They gathered around a large bonfire, the flames casting a warm glow over their faces. Rael stood before them, his expression serious but filled with determination. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying over the crackling of the fire, "we have come a long way in a short time. We have faced challenges and hardships, but we have also grown stronger, both individually and as a team. Today, I want to talk to you about the importance of our unity." He paused, letting his words sink in. Unity does not mean that we all think or act alike. It means that we recognize and respect each other's differences, that we understand that strength comes from diversity. Each of you brings something unique to our team, and it is that diversity that makes us strong. He gestured to the recruits, a diverse group of humans, orcs, goblins, and undead, each with their own background and story. "Look around you. We are not just warriors or mages or strategists. We are a family, bound by a common purpose. And it is that unity, that sense of shared purpose, that will see us through the challenges ahead." The recruits nodded, their faces reflecting a mixture of determination and understanding. They had come from different walks of life, but now they stood together, united in their goal of creating a better future. As the night wore on, Rael led the recruits in a series of team-building exercises. They worked together to solve puzzles, navigate obstacle courses, and overcome various challenges. Each task required them to communicate, cooperate, and trust each other, reinforcing the bonds of unity that were forming among them. By the time the exercises were over, the recruits were exhausted but exhilarated. They had faced the challenges together and emerged stronger for it. As they gathered around the fire once more, Rael could see the sense of camaraderie and purpose shining in their eyes. "We are stronger together than we could ever be alone," Rael said, his voice filled with conviction. "As we continue our training and prepare for the battles ahead, remember that we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for a future where all races can live in peace and harmony. And together, we will achieve that future." Chapter 7. The First Skirmish. The night hung heavy with anticipation as Rael's forces gathered at the edge of the forest, shrouded in darkness. The moon cast a pale glow over the clearing, illuminating the determined faces of the recruits as they prepared for their first true test of strength and unity. Rael stood at the forefront, his gaze unwavering as he addressed his troops. "Today, we face a challenge that will test not only our skills but also our resolve. The goblin tribe that terrorizes these lands has preyed upon the innocent for far too long. Today, we put an end to their tyranny and show the people that they have protectors among them." His words echoed through the clearing, stirring something deep within the hearts of his recruits. They stood a little taller, their weapons gripped tightly in anticipation of the coming battle. Alistair stepped forward, his presence commanding attention even in the dim light. "We have a plan," he announced, his voice firm and resolute. "We will strike swiftly and decisively, trapping the goblins between our forces and leaving them no room to escape. Serafina and her mages will provide support from the rear, raining down fire and lightning upon our enemies." Serafina nodded, her eyes alight with determination. "We will create barriers to funnel the goblins into our trap, using our magic to disrupt their ranks and sow chaos among them." Lysandra, ever the strategist, outlined the details of the plan, assigning each unit their role and position. "We move as one," she declared, her voice cutting through the night like a blade. "We fight for each other, for the people we protect, and for the future we strive to build." With the plan set and their resolve steeled, Rael's forces moved out into the darkness, their footsteps silent as they advanced towards the goblin encampment. The first light of dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and gold as Rael's forces closed in on their target. The air was thick with tension, each breath tinged with the promise of battle. As they reached the outskirts of the goblin encampment, Rael signaled for his forces to halt. They crouched low in the underbrush, hidden from view as they waited for the signal to attack. Minutes passed like hours, the anticipation building with each passing moment. Then, with a silent nod from Rael, the attack began. Arrows flew through the air, finding their mark among the goblin sentries who stood watch over their camp. The chaos of battle erupted as Rael's forces charged forward, their war cries echoing through the forest as they descended upon the unsuspecting goblins. The clash of steel rang out through the clearing as Rael's forces engaged the enemy, their weapons flashing in the early morning light. The goblins, taken by surprise, fought fiercely but were no match for the disciplined and coordinated assault of Rael's troops. Alistair's forces moved in from one side, cutting off any chance of escape for the goblins. Serafina's mages unleashed torrents of fire and lightning, their spells wreaking havoc among the enemy ranks. Rael himself fought at the forefront, his sword flashing in the sunlight as he cut down goblin after goblin. Beside him, his allies fought with equal ferocity, their movements fluid and precise as they worked together to overcome their adversaries. Despite their initial shock, the goblins rallied, their numbers bolstered by reinforcements pouring from the depths of the forest. But Rael's forces held firm, their determination unwavering as they pushed back against the tide of enemies. As the battle raged on, Rael's forces gained the upper hand, their discipline and unity proving too much for the disorganized goblins to overcome. With each passing moment, the goblins faltered, their ranks thinning as they fell before the relentless onslaught of Rael's troops. Finally, as the last of the goblin forces fell, a victorious roar echoed through the clearing. Rael's forces stood triumphant, their weapons stained with blood but their spirits soaring high. "We have won," Rael declared, his voice ringing out above the din of battle. "Today, we have shown the people that they have protectors among them. Today, we have struck a blow against tyranny and injustice. But our work is not yet done. We must remain vigilant, for the road ahead will be long and filled with challenges." With the sun rising high in the sky, casting its warm glow over the battlefield strewn with the remnants of the defeated goblin tribe, Rael's forces began the arduous task of consolidating their power in the region. Amidst the aftermath of the skirmish, Rael gathered his key advisors, Alistair, Serafina, and Lysandra, to discuss their next steps. They sat around a makeshift table in their camp, maps spread out before them, as they strategized their next moves. "Our victory today was decisive, but we cannot afford to rest on our laurels," Rael began, his voice grave but determined. "We must use this momentum to strengthen our position and solidify our control over the region." Alistair nodded in agreement, his expression serious. "We need to fortify our base and establish a stronger presence in the surrounding villages. Our enemies will not rest, and we must be prepared to defend ourselves at a moment's notice." Serafina added her voice to the discussion, her tone thoughtful. "We should also focus on expanding our magical training program. The mages proved invaluable in today's battle, but we need to ensure that we have a sufficient number of skilled practitioners to support our forces." Lysandra, ever the strategist, suggested reaching out to neighboring lords and factions to form alliances. "Strength in numbers will be crucial if we are to face larger threats in the future. We should send emissaries to establish diplomatic relations and gather intelligence on potential allies and enemies." Rael listened to his advisors, their words weighing heavily on his mind. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was confident in their ability to overcome them together. After their meeting, Rael set about implementing their plan. He assigned units to fortify their base, reinforcing its defenses and establishing a network of watchtowers to keep an eye on the surrounding area. Patrols were dispatched to the nearby villages, offering protection and reassurance to the inhabitants. Meanwhile, Serafina began expanding her magical training program, recruiting new mages and intensifying their training regime. She worked tirelessly to unlock their potential, pushing them to master new spells and techniques that would serve them well in future battles. Lysandra took charge of diplomatic relations, sending emissaries to neighboring lords and factions to negotiate alliances and gather intelligence. She navigated the intricate web of politics with finesse, using her sharp wit and cunning to secure favorable agreements for Rael's cause. As the days passed, Rael's forces grew stronger and more unified, their presence in the region becoming a beacon of hope for the people they protected. The villagers began to look to them not just as defenders, but as leaders, their trust in Rael and his allies unwavering. But amidst the preparations and celebrations, Rael remained vigilant. He knew that their victory today was just the beginning, and that greater challenges lay ahead. The road to peace and prosperity would be long and fraught with peril, but he was determined to see it through to the end. As the sun set on another day in the region, Rael stood at the edge of their base, gazing out over the landscape with a sense of determination. The fires of the skirmish still smoldered in the distance, a reminder of the battles they had fought and the victories they had won. But Rael knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. The road ahead would be difficult, but he was confident that together, they would overcome whatever challenges lay in their path. For they were not just soldiers or mages or strategists, they were a family, bound by a common purpose and a shared vision of a better world. Chapter 8. Uncovering the plot. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the deserted alley where Rail awaited his informant. The air was thick with anticipation as he stood, cloaked in the darkness, his senses alert for any sign of movement. A soft footfall echoed from the shadows, and Rail tensed, his hand drifting instinctively towards the hilt of his sword. But before he could react, a figure emerged from the darkness, a hooded figure cloaked in shadow. "Rail," a voice whispered, barely audible over the rustle of the night breeze. Rail nodded, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "I'm here. You have information for me?" The figure stepped forward, the moonlight glinting off the edge of a dagger tucked into their belt. "I do," they said, their voice low and gravelly. "But we must be quick. There are eyes and ears everywhere." Rail nodded, his senses on high alert as he listened to the informant's tale. They spoke of dark dealings and secret alliances, of whispered conversations and hidden agendas. And at the center of it all was Rail's own brother, plotting and scheming to further his own ambitions at any cost. As the informant revealed more details of his brother's treachery, Rail felt a cold fury building inside him. He had always known his brother was ambitious, but he had never imagined the depths to which he would sink in his pursuit of power. "And the poison?" Rail asked, his voice tight with emotion. The informant nodded grimly. "It was provided by a notorious alchemist known for his deadly concoctions. Your brother sought him out in secret, paying a hefty sum for a poison that would leave no trace." Rail clenched his fists, his jaw set in a steely resolve. "Thank you for bringing this to me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have risked much to help me, and I will not forget it." The informant nodded, their hood drawn low over their face. "Be careful, Rail. Your brother is not to be underestimated. He will stop at nothing to protect his interests." With that, the informant melted back into the shadows, leaving Rail alone with his thoughts. He stood in the alley for a long moment, the weight of the revelation settling heavily on his shoulders. But as he turned to leave, a fire ignited within him, a burning desire for justice, for truth, for vengeance. He would confront his brother, expose his crimes to the world, and ensure that justice was served, no matter the cost. Back at their base, Rail wasted no time in gathering his advisors, Lysandra and Alistair, to discuss their next course of action. They sat around a table in the command tent, the dim light of a single lantern casting long shadows across their faces. Rail recounted everything he had learned from the informant, his voice steady but filled with a simmering anger. Lysandra listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought, while Alistair's jaw clenched in silent rage. "This changes everything," Lysandra said, her voice breaking the tense silence that had settled over the tent. "We cannot allow your brother to continue unchecked. We must expose his crimes and bring him to justice." Alistair nodded in agreement, his fists clenched tight. "We'll need evidence," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Hard evidence that will stand up in court. We can't afford to make any mistakes." Rail nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "I'll send our most trusted emissaries to gather information and witness testimonies," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We'll leave no stone unturned until we have enough evidence to bring my brother to trial." With their plan set in motion, Rail and his advisors began coordinating their efforts. They dispatched emissaries to nearby villages and towns, seeking out anyone who might have information about his brother's crimes. Meanwhile, Rail focused on rallying support for their cause. He reached out to neighboring lords and influential figures, sharing the evidence of his brother's treachery and urging them to join their cause. The morning sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the landscape as Rail and his advisors gathered in the war room of their base. Maps were spread out on the table, dotted with markers indicating their allies and potential enemies. "We have gathered significant evidence against your brother," Lysandra began, her voice firm and determined. "But we cannot confront him alone. We need allies, powerful allies who will stand with us in the face of his treachery." Rail nodded, his gaze sweeping over the maps before him. "Agreed. We must reach out to neighboring lords and factions, seeking their support in our cause." Alistair, ever the strategist, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "We must choose our allies wisely. We need those who are willing to stand with us against my brother, even in the face of adversity." With their plan set, Rail set about dispatching his most trusted emissaries to neighboring lords and influential figures, carrying with them the evidence of his brother's crimes and the call to arms for justice. Meanwhile, Rail and his forces continued to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with his brother. Alistair took charge of organizing the troops, ensuring they were ready for any retaliation from his brother or his allies. Serafina focused on enhancing the magical defenses around their base, creating wards and barriers to protect against potential attacks. As the days passed, their efforts began to bear fruit. Messages of support and pledges of allegiance poured in from neighboring lords and factions, each one eager to join Rail's cause and stand against his brother's tyranny. But amidst the preparations and celebrations, Rail remained vigilant. He knew that their victory was far from assured, and that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Rael and his forces stood at the ready, their allies gathered around them, as they prepared to confront his brother and expose his crimes to the world. The tension in the air was palpable as Rael's forces marched towards his brother's stronghold, their banners flying high in the breeze. The sun beat down upon them, casting long shadows across the battlefield as they advanced. As they reached the outskirts of the stronghold, Rael could feel the weight of the moment pressing down upon him. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for, the culmination of all their efforts. With a determined nod to his advisors, Rael gave the signal to advance. His forces surged forward, their war cries echoing across the battlefield as they charged towards their destiny. The clash of steel rang out through the air as Rael's forces clashed with his brother's defenders. Swords flashed and arrows flew as the two sides fought tooth and nail for supremacy. But amidst the chaos of battle, Rael remained focused on his objective. With determination burning in his heart, he fought his way through the fray, his eyes fixed on his brother's stronghold in the distance. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached the gates of the stronghold. With a mighty heave, Rael's forces broke through the defenses, their momentum carrying them forward into the heart of the fortress. And there, standing before them, was Rael's brother, the man who had betrayed him, who had conspired against him, who had tried to take everything from him. The courtyard of the stronghold was a scene of chaos and turmoil as Rael's forces clashed with his brother's defenders. Swords clashed, arrows flew, and spells crackled through the air as the two sides fought tooth and nail for supremacy. Amidst the chaos, Rael's eyes burned with determination as he pressed forward, cutting down any who stood in his path. His brother's betrayal had ignited a fire within him, a fire fueled by justice and the desire to set things right. With each step he took, memories of his past flashed before his eyes, memories of a time when he was innocent and trusting, before his brother's jealousy had turned to treachery and deceit. But there was no room for sentiment now, no room for the past. There was only the present, and the task that lay before him, to confront his brother and expose his crimes to the world. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Rael reached the inner sanctum of the stronghold, the heart of his brother's power. With a mighty kick, he burst through the doors, his sword gleaming in the dim light of the chamber beyond. And there, seated upon a throne of gold and marble, was his brother, the man who had betrayed him, who had conspired against him, who had tried to take everything from him. Their eyes met across the chamber, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still as they faced each other across the divide. "Rael," his brother said, his voice cold and contemptuous, "I see you've come to beg for mercy. But there will be no mercy for traitors like you." Rael's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on his sword. "I am no traitor," he replied, his voice ringing with conviction. "It is you who betrayed our family, who conspired against me, who tried to poison me to further your own ambitions." His brother's eyes widened in shock, a flicker of fear passing across his face before he regained his composure. "You have no proof," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "It is your word against mine." But Rael was not deterred. With a determined stride, he crossed the chamber, his eyes never leaving his brother's face. "I have more than just my word," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "I have witnesses, evidence, everything I need to expose your crimes to the world." As he spoke, Rael's allies entered the chamber behind him, their weapons at the ready. They stood at his side, a silent but formidable presence, as he faced down his brother and prepared to confront him once and for all. For a moment, there was silence, a tense, palpable silence that hung heavy in the air. And then, without warning, his brother lunged forward, his sword flashing in the dim light of the chamber. But Rael was ready. With lightning-fast reflexes, he parried his brother's blow, their swords ringing out as they clashed in a deadly dance of steel. The battle that followed was fierce and brutal, each blow struck with the force of desperation and rage. But Rael fought with a determination born of righteous fury, his heart set on justice and redemption. With each stroke of his sword, he pushed his brother back, driving him towards the edge of the chamber. And then, with a final, decisive blow, he disarmed him, sending his sword clattering to the ground. Their eyes locked once more, and in that moment, Rael saw something in his brother's gaze, a flicker of remorse, of regret, of the man he used to be before ambition and jealousy had consumed him. And then, with a heavy heart, Rael delivered the final blow, his sword piercing his brother's heart and ending his reign of tyranny once and for all. As his brother fell to the ground, lifeless and defeated, Rael felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a burden of guilt and betrayal that had plagued him for far too long. Chapter 9. Strengthening Ties. The journey to the Orc territory was fraught with tension, as Rael, accompanied by Alistair and a small contingent of his trusted advisors, traversed through rugged terrain and dense forests. The history between humans and orcs was marked by centuries of conflict and mistrust, and Rael knew that negotiating an alliance would not be an easy task. As they approached the Orc territory, the air seemed to thicken with an unspoken tension. The looming presence of the Orc stronghold, with its towering walls and imposing gates, served as a stark reminder of the formidable warriors who dwelled within. Upon their arrival, they were met with a guarded reception. Orc warriors, their faces etched with suspicion, eyed the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Rael felt the weight of their gaze upon him as he stepped forward, his demeanor calm and composed. They were escorted into the heart of the orc stronghold, where the chieftain, Grushak, awaited them. Grushak was a towering figure, his muscular frame adorned with intricate tattoos and battle scars that spoke of a lifetime of combat. Chieftain Grushak, Rael greeted him with a respectful nod, his voice steady and unwavering. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." Grushak regarded Rael with a stern expression, his eyes narrowing as he studied him. "You come seeking an alliance," he rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. "But what can you offer us, human?" Rael took a step forward, meeting Grushak's gaze with a determined look in his eyes. "We offer mutual protection and shared resources," he replied, his voice carrying the weight of sincerity. "Together, we can stand against our common enemies and ensure the safety and prosperity of our lands." Grushak grunted in response, his expression still guarded. "And what of our traditions and autonomy?" he demanded, his tone challenging. Rael nodded, acknowledging the validity of Grushak's concerns. "I understand the importance of respecting your ways," he said, his voice earnest. "We seek an alliance based on equality and mutual respect. Your autonomy will be preserved, and your traditions honored." For several tense moments, Grushak said nothing, his gaze fixed on Rael as if searching for any sign of deceit or deception. Then, slowly, he nodded, a flicker of respect passing through his eyes. "Very well, human," Grushak rumbled, his voice gruff but not unkind. "We will consider your proposal. But know this, if you seek to betray us, there will be consequences." Rael nodded, accepting the warning with a solemn nod. "I understand," he said, his voice firm. "But I assure you, we seek only peace and cooperation between our peoples." With that, Rael and his party took their leave, their hearts heavy with the weight of the task that lay before them. The negotiations had only just begun, but already Rael could sense the potential for a new era of cooperation and understanding between humans and orcs. Days turned into weeks as Rael and his advisors worked tirelessly to solidify the alliance with the orc tribe. Their efforts were met with cautious optimism from both sides, as human and orc warriors alike began to train together, forging bonds of camaraderie and mutual respect on the training grounds. Rael spared no expense in ensuring that the orc warriors were integrated seamlessly into his army. Training sessions were organized, led by both human and orc instructors, where warriors from both races learned each other's fighting techniques and strategies. The training grounds echoed with the sound of clashing steel and hearty laughter as human and orc warriors sparred together, each learning from the other's strengths and weaknesses. Rael himself often joined in the training sessions, leading by example and demonstrating his commitment to the alliance. Serafina, ever the adept mage, took it upon herself to train the orc shamans in the magical arts. Under her guidance, the shamans honed their natural abilities, learning new spells and techniques that would bolster the magical prowess of the combined army. As the days passed, the bonds between human and orc warriors deepened, forged in the crucible of combat and camaraderie. No longer were they two separate entities, but one unified force, bound together by a common purpose and shared values. But it was not just on the training grounds where the alliance flourished. Rael worked closely with Grushak and his council to ensure that the orc tribe's autonomy was respected and their traditions honored. Together, they established a council comprising both human and orc leaders to oversee the integration process and address any issues that arose. This council served as a forum for open dialogue and cooperation, ensuring that both sides had a voice in the alliance. As the weeks turned into months, the alliance between Rael's army and the orc tribe grew stronger with each passing day. Human and orc warriors fought side by side, their differences set aside in the face of a common enemy. And when the time came for their first joint operation, they were ready. With Rael and Grushak leading the charge, they marched out to face a common foe, a band of marauding bandits who threatened the safety and security of both their lands. The battle that followed was fierce and brutal, but Rael's forces fought with a ferocity born of unity and determination. Human and orc warriors fought side by side, their weapons flashing in the sunlight as they drove back the bandits with unwavering resolve. When the dust settled and the last of the bandits had been defeated, Rael and Grushak stood side by side, their chests heaving with exertion but their spirits soaring with triumph. They had faced their first test as allies and emerged victorious, their bonds stronger than ever. As they returned to their respective territories, Rael couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and satisfaction. The alliance between humans and orcs was no longer just a dream. It was a reality, forged in the fires of battle and tempered by the trials of war. Chapter 10. The Siege of Darkhold. The air was charged with anticipation as Rael stood atop a hill overlooking the imposing walls of Darkhold, his gaze fixed on the fortress looming in the distance. The stronghold had long been a thorn in his side, a bastion of rebellion and defiance against rightful governance. But now, with his forces gathered and his alliance with the orc tribe solidified, Rael knew that the time had come to bring Darkhold to heel. Surrounding him were the diverse warriors of his coalition, human soldiers, orc warriors, and even a few dwarven mercenaries, their banners fluttering in the breeze as they prepared for battle. Behind them, siege engines rumbled into position, their massive frames casting long shadows over the landscape. Rael turned to his advisors, his expression grim but determined. "The siege begins now," he declared, his voice carrying over the assembled forces. "We will cut off Darkhold's supply lines, isolate the fortress, and weaken its defenses before launching a full-scale assault. This will not be an easy fight, but together, we will prevail." With that, the order was given, and Rael's forces sprang into action. Orc scouts were dispatched to disrupt Darkhold's supply lines, ambushing supply caravans and cutting off routes in and out of the fortress. Meanwhile, Serafina and her cadre of mages erected magical barriers around the stronghold, preventing reinforcements from entering and trapping the defenders within. As the days passed, the siege intensified. Rael's forces encircled Darkhold, establishing encampments around the fortress and reinforcing their positions with wooden palisades and earthworks. Siege engines, including catapults and battering rams, were brought to the forefront, ready to breach the walls when the moment was right. Under the cover of darkness, Rael's scouts launched nightly raids on Darkhold's defenses, probing for weaknesses and gathering intelligence on the fortress's layout and defenses. Meanwhile, Alistair and his ground troops conducted reconnaissance missions, scouting the perimeter for potential vulnerabilities and identifying key targets for the assault. But as the siege dragged on, tensions within Rael's coalition began to rise. The diverse factions, each with their own customs and traditions, struggled to find common ground, leading to disputes and disagreements over strategy and tactics. Rael knew that maintaining unity among his forces was essential if they were to succeed in their mission. He called a council of war, bringing together leaders from each faction to discuss their next steps. "It is imperative that we work together as one," Rael declared, his voice firm but measured. "Our differences may be many, but our goal is the same, to bring Darkhold to its knees and end the tyranny of its rulers once and for all." The council deliberated late into the night, hashing out their differences and forging a unified strategy for the assault on Darkhold. In the end, a consensus was reached, and Rael's forces were ready to move forward with renewed purpose and determination. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Rael stood at the head of his army, his sword held high as he addressed his troops. "Today, we make history," he declared, his voice ringing out with unwavering resolve. "Today, we begin the siege of Darkhold, and together, we will emerge victorious." The morning mist clung to the ground as Rael's forces arrayed themselves before the imposing walls of Darkhold. The air was thick with anticipation and the distant clatter of armor as soldiers prepared for the siege. Today, the stronghold that had defied so many would finally be tested. Rael surveyed the scene from his position atop a raised platform. He could see the banners of the orcs fluttering alongside those of human houses, a powerful testament to the unity he had forged. The siege engines, monstrous constructs of wood and iron, stood ready to unleash their fury. Beside him, Alistair and Serafina discussed the final elements of their strategy, their voices low but intense. "Begin the assault with the catapults," Rael commanded, his voice cutting through the morning air like a clarion call. "Target the walls and the gates. We must breach their defenses quickly." Nods of affirmation came from his commanders, and the order was relayed down the line. The tension that had been building reached its peak as the first of the catapults was loosed. A great boulder, wrapped in pitch and set aflame, arched through the sky and crashed against the high walls with a thunderous impact that shook the earth. The bombardment continued, a relentless barrage that sent stone and fire against the stout defenses of Darkhold. Each impact was cheered by Rael's troops, their morale buoyed by the sight of their enemy's stronghold slowly giving way. As the walls began to show signs of wear, Grushak, the orc chieftain, rallied his warriors with a roar that echoed across the battlefield. "For glory, for victory," he bellowed, leading a contingent of his fiercest fighters to prepare for the breach. Rael turned to Serafina, nodding. "Support them with your magic. Protect our warriors and confound the defenders." With graceful movements, Serafina raised her arms, her incantations summoning a thick mist that began to envelop the battlefield, obscuring the movements of Rael's forces and disorienting the defenders. Bolts of lightning and balls of fire cast by her fellow mages flew into the breaches, wreaking havoc among the defenders who dared to resist. Meanwhile, Alistair orchestrated the movements of the infantry, sending squads to exploit the openings created by the siege engines. The crack of the Darkhold gates under the relentless assault of a battering ram was the signal for a general advance. With a resounding cry, Rael's forces surged forward, pouring into the fortress through breaches and the shattered main gate. The battle within the walls was fierce and brutal. Darkhold's defenders, though rattled, were well trained and fought desperately to protect their stronghold. Rael himself entered the fray, his blade dancing with lethal precision as he cut down enemy after enemy, his presence inspiring his troops to push forward. In the chaos, Rael's forces gradually gained ground, their momentum seemingly unstoppable. But as they approached the inner keep, a rallying cry from the defenders halted their advance. The Lord of Darkhold, a renowned warrior in his own right, appeared atop the parapet, rallying his men for a counterattack. Rael, seeing the potential shift in battle tide, called for Grushak. Together, they led a charge that would decide the fate of the siege. As they fought side by side, an unlikely but powerful alliance displayed for all, the defenders' resolve began to waver. At that crucial moment, Serafina unleashed her most potent magic. A spectacular display of arcane power lit the sky as she summoned a dragon of pure fire, which swooped down over the keep. Its fiery breath set the stronghold ablaze, sowing chaos and fear among the defenders. Seeing their doom manifest above them, the will of Darkhold's defenders finally broke. The Lord of Darkhold, recognizing the futility of further resistance, threw down his sword and surrender, his face a mask of defeat and despair. As the dust settled and silence fell over Darkhold, Rael's forces took control of the stronghold. The banners of his coalition were raised over the battlements, a symbol of their hard-won victory and the new order that was to come. In the aftermath of the battle, Rael addressed his weary but victorious warriors. This stronghold was a symbol of division and rebellion, he proclaimed, standing before the gathered troops and the subdued citizens of Darkhold. Let it now be a symbol of our unity and strength. Together, we have achieved a great victory, but our work is not yet finished. We must rebuild what was destroyed and forge a future of peace and prosperity for all.